main characters or ideas that we are to see, I think, from the author in this passage. The first one is this, clearly, the witnesses. The witnesses. Verse 1, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. Now, this cloud, of course, is in reference to all of those that we just read about in chapter 11. You remember chapter 11, referred to as the Hall of Faith? We're reminded of all these great people of faith and the things that they accomplished and the things that they endured by faith. That's who the cloud of witnesses is. He's saying, therefore, since those witnesses exist, let us thus and so. Now, this may have, and probably does, have some secondary reference to the idea that those people are up there watching us, cheering us in sort of an athletic endeavor. There's that language certainly here. That they are witnessing our lives and are cheering us on as we go. There's probably some secondary reference to that idea. I think the Bible gives us indication that those who are in heaven see what's going on and are aware of what's going on the earth and are in some sense even assembled with us as we gather together. We'll look at one of those verses in particular in a few weeks, actually. But that's not what primarily this verse means when it talks about the cloud of witnesses being there for us. Primarily, the main idea is that they are acting as eyewitnesses to what can be accomplished by faith. That they are not witnessing us in the sense of watching us, but witnessing to us about who God is. Witnessing to us about what Christ has done in life. Witnessing to us about the power of faith and the power to endure that is given to us by faith. Witnessing to us while we run. Remember the main point of chapter 11, the Hall of Faith, was the special thing about these people is that they trusted that God was going to get them through. That they looked forward to the joy that was coming in the future. And because of that faith and trusting God, despite the fact they couldn't see how God was going to get them out of it or get them to that place, that city, that presence of God, they trusted God anyway. By faith, Abel offered his very best to God, trusting that God would provide more best. By faith, Noah spent decades building a boat, trusting that God was telling the truth about a flood. By faith, Abraham left his comfortable home and went to the unknown, trusting that God was going to lead him in his next step as he promised that he would. By faith, Abraham sacrificed his only son, Isaac, the one whom he had prayed for 100 years, because he trusted that God was going to raise Isaac from the dead to keep up with the promise that God had made to him about Isaac. By faith, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph made preparations for the land that was to come, even though they would never see it. By faith, Moses gave up the riches of the world and the palaces of the world to take on instead the reproach of Christ, because he considered that to be more valuable than all the riches the world has to offer. By faith, the Israelites walked through walls of water, trusting God would hold them up. By faith, the Israelites marched around the powerful city of Jericho, trusting that God would provide them victory. Chapter 11 is saying these people couldn't see how God was going to do it, but they trusted that God would do it. And now, here those people are in this text and in the heavenlies, acting as witnesses to us, telling us that will happen for you as well. You too will find faith worthy. You too will find strength to endure. You too will find that Christ and God will actually fulfill his promises. They are witnessing to us that God is faithful. Witnessing to us that we can trust God. Witnessing to us that the reward at the end is real and worth every drop of blood that we experience while we're here. That's the idea as we begin chapter 12. It's not just that they're watching us. It's that they are testifying to us what they know to be true. That the life of faith is worth it and that God will help you to endure to the betterness of Christ than anything else the world has to offer. Testifying that the thing that you are going through today that you think you'll never get through, you will get through it. The New Living Translation translates it like this, which I like. It says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us lay aside every weight. Since we're surrounded by all these people who are saying, if you live a life of faith, you will make it, you will endure, and you will find more riches than anything apart from that life will ever be able to offer you. Since all these people are telling us this, let us run. They endured, most of them much worse things than you ever will endure, by faith. So can you. They had faith in awful circumstances. So can you. They were loyal to God when everything else wanted their loyalty. So can you be. They escaped the sword by faith. They died by the sword by faith. So can you. That's the message and the idea here. And the reality is, of course, it isn't just those great saints from Hebrews 11 that are part of that cloud of witnesses that are in the heavens and the scriptures cheering you on and testifying to you about the life of faith. It is all of those whom you love dearly who have gone on already to the Lord, who are now in the same way and in many ways more powerfully to you, testifying to you of the same truth from the heavenlies and from your rememberings of them and the things that they have said to you. They too, those you love who have gone to the Lord, endured failure after failure. They too endured health loss. They too endured betrayal and cruelty and real loss. They too endured losing parents and grandparents. They too endured confusion and questioning God and more pain than they thought they could handle. And they shout that God is faithful. They shout to you, their beloved, that God will get you through it and that in the end it will be worth it. They shout that God is trustworthy. For the joy set before them, all those in Hebrews 11, all those who came before, all those of your loved ones who have gone on to the Lord, for the joy that was set before them, they endured. Secondly, we have the leader. Our leader. Verse 2. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have yet to shed your own blood. The author says, of course, it isn't just they that act as witnesses to these truths. It is Christ himself testifying of this truth to you. It is Christ himself exempling that God is faithful and that he will do what he has promised to do. The author is saying, look not just to those witnesses, look to the witness, who is not just a witness, but is the founder of your faith. Not just a witness to the life of faith, but the perfecter of the life of faith. We spend a lot of time, so we won't here, looking at the reality that Christ is the pioneer or founder, the one who paved the way to God, and he is also the one who enters you and walks the path in you. That Christ is the beginner of your faith and the perfecter of your faith. But the clear connection point to the main logic here of this passage is that in the same way that the witnesses looked forward to that which they could not see and allowed them to endure in faith what they thought they could never endure, Christ too, for the joy set before him, endured. We know now more than ever about what Jesus endured, about the process of what Roman scourging and crucifixion was like. I'm going to read a short excerpt from non-Christian journals, just the Journal of the American Medical Association, about the physical part of Christ's pain. The first bit about the scourging that he endured. By the way, I don't know how much you know about this. Not everyone who went to the cross was scourged. Scourging was for the worst of the worst. It's the reason that the two criminals on the cross died much after Christ, because Christ was already almost dead when he got there because of the scourging. It was a rarity for one to endure both of these things. The usual instrument was a short whip with several single or braided leather straps of variable lengths, in which small iron balls and sharp pieces of sheep bone were tied at intervals. The man would be stripped of his clothing and his hands tied to an upright post. The back, buttocks, and legs were flogged. The scourging was intended to weaken the victim to a state just short of death. As the Roman soldiers repeatedly struck the victim's back with full force, the iron balls would cause deep contusions, and the leather straps and sheep bone would cut into the skin and subcutaneous tissue. Then, as the flogging continued, the lacerations would tear into the underlying skeletal muscle. It is said often that the scourging would expose the spine of the person and even the organs. And that's just the preparation for the crucifixion. The article then about the crucifixion says the driven nail, which would have gone into the wrists where all of your nerve endings come together. The driven nail would crush the large sensory motor median nerve. The stimulated nerves would produce excruciating bolts of fiery pain in both arms. One of the doctors said that it would be like when you hit what we call our funny bone and you have that nerve pain, which you don't feel anywhere else in your body except for there. It would be like if you took pliers and crushed those nerves that meet there. As he experienced the nails through his hands and through the wood and then through his feet and then lifted to suffocate. All of these physical pains, of course, pale in comparison to the spiritual agony of drinking evil and the wrath of God that was placed on him, the hell that he endured in those moments. The most humiliating death, the most painful and torturous death, the most unjust death because of the mob and the tyrant, having been betrayed by his friends, turned on by his people, killed despite being not just innocent, but having always done what was best, drinking the cup of evil and wrath, the worst thing imaginable happening to the best possible person. How did he endure? The answer is given us here, that he endured by faith for the joy set before him. Christ, unlike any other victim of torture or crucifixion or any other death, at any moment could have stopped all of it. And yet, he endured because of the joy set before him. What joy? The triumph of God's purpose in the universe, his exaltation to the right hand of the Father. But what is to be seen here largely is that he endured for the joy of opening a way for you. That he endured for the joy of cleansing and welcoming his bride into the wedding supper that we are heading towards and enjoying knowing you and me and the entire church intimately forevermore. He endured because he knew when he was exalted that you then could be exalted too. Revelation chapter, did I skip one? I must have missed it. That's okay. We'll get there in a moment. The joy that was set before him, the joy of you and me being with him as his people forever, allowed him to endure the most brutal moments that any human has ever endured in the history of the world. The witnesses endured for the joy set before them. Christ, the leader, endured for the joy set before him. What do you think is the call to you? The call given to us in this passage is the same thing that was the life of the witnesses, the same thing exampled in our leader. The call is to endure for the joy set before us. Verse 1 again. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that's set before us. The message being, faith is worth laying aside anything. There is nothing worth holding on to and not laying aside for the life of faith. It has two sort of ideas here. The idea of laying aside every weight is including good things along with bad things. It's not just sinful things. It's anything that is hindering your current run after the Lord. Anything that's currently hindering your walk with the Lord, throw it to the side. The picture, of course, being that the athlete, when he goes to run in a race, does not carry on his weights, but he throws off anything that's going to weigh him down. Literally, in the first century, it was them taking off their heavy and cumbersome robes so they could run unencumbered. That's the picture being laid here. In the same way, whatever is holding you back from running the race that God has called you to, throw it to the side, whatever it costs, whatever it takes. Maybe it's social media scrolling that's hindering your prayer life. Maybe you have friends that are much more threats to you being a gossip or to you falling again to sin than the kind of friends that will stoke your fire when it's growing cold. Maybe you are surrounding yourself with friends that laugh at your sin with you instead of hating it with you. Maybe you're spending too much time watching TV. Maybe you're too preoccupied with sports. Whatever it is, nothing too big and nothing too small. Lay aside anything that's keeping you from running better. I love the ESV language here about the second hindrance, the sin which clings so closely. The NIV said, which easily entangles. It's not hard for sin. It seems all too easy for us to be entangled again and again in sin, for sin to cling again to us over and over. One of the most disappointing realities is that even through the baptismal waters, even through giving your life entirely to Christ, you still on the other side of salvation find sin clinging to you, holding fast to you and not wanting to let go. It gets weaker through your life as the Spirit sanctifies you, but it never lets go. That word cling is like when you're walking through tall grass and you get those stickers all over your pants, all over your legs, and then you wipe them off and you walk some more, and there's just more, an abundance of these painful things, and you have to keep shedding yourself of these thorns and these thistles. This is, unfortunately, the Christian life. There is going to be sin that clings to you endlessly and constantly, and if you are not constantly fighting to remove the sins from your life, then you will find yourself entirely covered by sin. The famous John Owen line, you must be killing sin or sin will be killing you. So, since we have all of these witnesses to the life of faith and what the life of faith is capable of, conquering and dying, since we have Christ as our chief witness and leading example of what the life of faith is, the one who has promised to finish the work that he began, and all those who trust, throw off any hindrance and run. 1 Corinthians 9, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. 2 Timothy 4, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. I don't know how you can read the Bible, certainly read the book of Hebrews, and think that your life is meant to be simply ease and prosperity and health, and everyone likes you. The story in many cases ends up being the exact opposite of all those things. And yet, the witnesses of the entire Old Testament, the witnesses that are by the millions in the heavens right now, those that you love that have passed on, that are witnessing to you still, call out the life of faith is worth it. The life of faith is the only life that is truly valuable, and that in the life of faith you will find the strength to endure. One more reminder for your joy and endurance. Let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings, and let us run with endurance, this last line, the race that is set before us. Set by who? The race that you have been given, the path that you have been given to run, many of the parts of it have been a big surprise to you. None of them were a surprise to God. The race that you have been given, which is different than my race, and different than the race of the person sitting next to you, the particular race you've been given to run, is not surprising to God and has been given to you particularly because God knows you so well. God has given the race to you that he has given to you and to no one else, because the race for you is the pathway for your growth and the pathway for his glory. And God made no mistake when he assigned you this path to run. God made no mistake when he assigned you this race to be yours. So, what does your race hold tomorrow? I can't tell you, and neither can anyone else. But whatever it holds tomorrow is no surprise to God, and it's the race that he ordained as the best race for you. So let us run. Let us run without anxiety and without terror and without the fear that's conquering the rest of the world. Let us run knowing the next step has been assigned to me by God, and let us run there rejoicing and enduring and just remaining. They endured for the joy set before them. Christ endured for the joy set before him. Dear brother and sister, let us, with eyes set on the joy that is before us, on what is the life of faith, let us run. We've been finishing our series in the book of Hebrews by standing for the Word of God in connection with tradition. So if you'll stand, we're going to read from Isaiah chapter 40. Starting in verse 28 through 31. I love this. Have you not known? Haven't you heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. To him who has no might, who has no strength left, he increases strength. Even youths grow tired and weary. Even young men stumble and fall. But those who trust in the Lord will find their strength renewed. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. We join here together on Sunday mornings as those who have been charged with the task of running, and we run arm in arm with each other, with other brothers and sisters who meet together with the other runners running after Christ, wandering all the time, sinning constantly, and yet being called back to the grace of God and each other bringing us back to that particular path that God has called you to. If we can help you in that path of running, this is why we exist. Not because God needs us here, but because we need us here. If we can pray for you, if we can do anything at all, you can come while we sing.